We set a record, Eugene. I want you to know at 20, we have 20 people here. That's not even evangelistically speaking. We got 20 bodies here, okay? That's great. All right. Now, I lost my Bible that quickly. I just talked about it. Did I leave my Bible back there? No. Oh, here it is, right here. Okay, we're good.
Brad moved
That would be
it.
absent-minded professor. I went to the eyeglass place, by the way, a couple days ago. I got 2 glasses for the price of 1 in case I drop them in the trash can again. I'll be fine. So I'll be safe. Thank God. Remember a couple of weeks ago I thought I had to preach my first sermon without my glasses. That would be an adventure, let me tell you. All right. We're in John chapter 20. If you want to turn to John 20. The study tonight will center in verses 19 through 21. John 20, 19 through 21. It's a really powerful passage of Scripture. We've been looking into the appearances that Jesus made after he rose from the dead. Now remember, he was on earth for 40 days before he ascended into heaven. So I came up with the idea so that we can learn more about those post-resurrection appearances, that if I have 6 weeks of messages, that will take us to 42 days on Sundays. But Friday, right before that Sunday, will be 40 days. So we will be studying the ascension on the 40th day, which it will help us to picture what it must have been like for Jesus' followers to be with Jesus for 40 days before he ascended into heaven. After Jesus suffered and died, remember, he rose again the 3rd day. And after he rose again, he appeared to his disciples, and then he would disappear. And so we've been studying, in my text messages I sent out to you, we've been studying those appearances that Jesus made. The book of Acts, chapter 1, tells us that Jesus gave many convincing proofs that he was alive. And let me give you at least 4. Number 1, he entered the room when the doors were locked. Can you imagine what that must have been like to be with the disciples? The door was locked, and Jesus went right through the door, and he was with them. That was the first convincing proof he was alive. Secondly, he showed his crucifixion wounds, the holes in his hands, and also the spear that was thrust into his side, and also the nail prints in his feet. So that was the second convincing proof. The third one, he ate and drank with his disciples. And then the fourth one, which is the one we most of all think about, he would appear to his followers and then he would disappear. Why? Because he was trying to prepare them for what it would be like without him on the earth. Remember, Jesus' disciples had spent 3 years every day with Jesus for 3 years. And then he told them he was no longer going to be with them, so they were sad, they were afraid, and they were confused and discouraged. So that brings us to John chapter 20, and we're going to look into the account that Jesus appeared to 10 of the disciples. You say, why 10? Well, Judas Iscariot wasn't with them, but also Thomas was not there. Thomas. So keep that in mind as I read John chapter 20, and I'm going to read verses 19 through 21. John 20, and I'll begin reading in verse 19. We looked at verses 1 to 18 last week. It says, then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled for, you see that next word? Fear. Fear of the Jews. Jesus came and stood in the midst and said to them, peace be with you. Peace. Verse 20, when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples were, notice, they were glad. Why? When they saw the Lord. And then verse 21. So Jesus said to them again, peace. There it is for the second time. Peace to you. And then these powerful words, as the Father has sent me, we'll use the old King James Version, so send I you. Remember that? So send I you. Powerful words. So we're going to look at, this will be the 5th appearance that Jesus made after he rose again. Now keep in mind, if you've been following along, Sunday morning, Jesus appeared first to Mary Magdalene. We studied that last week, remember? Mary Magdalene, first appearance. Second, he appeared to the other women. Third, he appeared to Peter. That was all Sunday morning. Sunday afternoon of the day that he rose again, Sunday afternoon, Jesus appeared to the 2 disciples, remember, on the road to Emmaus. And then Sunday evening, now it's Sunday evening, in our study tonight, Jesus appears to the 10 disciples minus Thomas. Then, the 6th appearance, he appeared to, the 6th appearance, let's see, was the following Sunday. And now Thomas was there, remember? He didn't believe the first time. He wanted proof, remember? And now the following Sunday, Jesus appears again to the disciples, and this time Thomas was there. And then over the next 32 days, Jesus appeared to 7 disciples. They were at the Sea of Galilee. You say, why only 7? Because 7 of the disciples were fishermen, remember? 7 were fishing at the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus appeared to them. That was number 7. Isn't it interesting? The 7th appearance was to 7 disciples. That's interesting to me. 8th appearance was to 500 at one time. 500 on a mountain in Galilee, and that may be the Great Commission passage in Matthew 28. Then Jesus appeared to his brother James, and then the final appearance was when he ascended into heaven, and that is in Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives. We'll look at that in Acts chapter 1. But the study tonight, fascinating passage in John chapter 20, and beginning of verse 19 through 21. Now I want you to think about what it must have been like for Jesus' followers, because Jesus had died, and then on the 3rd day, he had told his followers, remember his disciples, I'm going to rise again the 3rd day. But they didn't believe him, so they were sad. And news spread quickly, as you might imagine. The news that Jesus was alive spread very quickly. But unfortunately, they didn't believe the reports. Even Jesus' own disciples did not believe for the reports of the women or of the 2 on the road to Emmaus who said they had seen Jesus. But keep this in mind. Wherever Jesus appeared to his followers, they were convinced he was alive, and it transformed their lives, as it should. It changed them. Jesus moved the disciples from fear to courage. And I don't know if anybody was watching the conference today. Anybody watched the conference in Oklahoma? Yeah, Denise was, I know. But there was an interesting thing that someone said there I wanted to share with you, because it's exactly what happened with the 10 disciples. Erin Olszewski, that's how Clay Clark pronounced it, but I think she pronounced it differently. But anyway, this is what she said. Now I want you to listen to this. She said, we must reject fear and embrace courage. And that is what the disciples had to do as well. See, they had to reject fear, they were afraid, and they had to embrace courage. So they were turned, you see, when they saw Jesus, they were turned from fear, from being afraid, to being courageous and bold. What made the difference was that Jesus, they knew, was alive. So we're going to see tonight that the 10 disciples were moved from fear to courage. So let me read again verse 19 in preparation for the study tonight. Then the same day, this is Sunday evening now, remember, Resurrection Day. The same day at evening now, this is the 5th time that Jesus appeared to his followers, one of his followers. The same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled for fear. See that? For fear of the Jews. Jesus came and stood in the midst, and he said to them, what's that first word?
Peace.
Peace. And it's repeated twice in this passage. We all want to have peace, don't we? We need that in our lives. We need that in our homes, in our churches. We certainly need that in our nation, don't we? Peace. Peace be with you, Jesus said. We're going to find that the disciples are going to be moved from fear to courage. Now keep in mind that Jesus rested in the tomb on the Sabbath. and he rose from the dead on the first day of the week. That is why we worship on the first day of the week. We don't worship on the Sabbath day anymore. Many people sincerely call Sunday the Christian Sabbath. It is not the Christian Sabbath. Sunday is not the Sabbath day. The seventh day of the week is the Sabbath, and that commemorates God's finished work of creation. Remember, God created the world in 6 days. I believe there were 6 24-hour days. It was not hard for God to create the whole world in 6 24-hour days. God can do anything. He could do that, certainly. So think about this now. God the Father worked for 6 days, and then he rested. You say, why? Was he tired? No. He rested because his work was done. His work of creation was done. Now keep this in mind too. I just said that God worked for 6 days creating the world, and then he rested. God the Son suffered on the cross for 6 hours, and then he rested because the work of redemption was finished. Now keep this in mind. We don't worship on the Sabbath day. Why? Because God gave the Sabbath to Israel, not to the Gentiles, to Israel. All right? It was a special sign that the Jews belonged to him. And so we need to remember that the Sabbath day was not given to Gentiles. And an interesting point is the Ten Commandments in the New Testament, the only one that's not repeated is remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. I wonder why. Because we don't worship on the Sabbath. Now keep this in mind too. Sunday, every Sunday when we come here, we do that because we are commemorating the fact that Jesus rose again. He's not in the tomb. You look at the cross, it's empty. The tomb was empty. Jesus is alive. So not only Resurrection Day, that Sunday, commemorate Jesus' resurrection the most, but every Sunday is a resurrection day, because that's when we worship the Lord, you see? So that's why the early believers met together on Sundays. After this, they met on Sundays. Although hundreds of years before that, the Jews met on the Sabbath day, now it changed. What changed that? The fact that Jesus rose again. That's why we worship on Sunday. Now, I'd like us to think about 3 things, 3 ways that Jesus transformed his disciples from fear into courage. Because these 3 will help you if you're afraid and you need to have courage. Let me share with you the 3 things that Jesus did. Number 1, he came to his disciples. He came to them. Number 2, he reassured them. And number 3, he commissioned them. Let me repeat that if you're taking notes. He came to them, he reassured them, and then he commissioned them. That is how Jesus transformed his disciples' fear into courage. Let's look at the first one. And we find it in verse 19. The same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled, so they're afraid, the doors were locked, for fear of the Jews, so they were afraid. It says Jesus what? He came. See that? Jesus came. The first thing that Jesus did to transform the disciples' fear into courage is that he came to them. Isn't that always the way it is? Have you ever been afraid or you don't have any peace, and then you pray and the Lord, you just feel his presence with you even closer to you, right? That's what he does. Jesus comes just when we need him most, doesn't he? And that's what we find here. If ever the disciples needed him, it was now, because they were afraid. The doors were locked. They were afraid that they were going to have the same thing that happened to Jesus would happen to them. And so they were in a locked room when Jesus appeared to them, and he came to them. Now, we don't know exactly where. This passage doesn't tell us where these 10 frightened disciples were. Could have been the upper room in Jerusalem, possibly, when Jesus appeared to them. But the important thing is he came to them. And he came to them in his new resurrection body. Jesus, remember, was the first one to rise again with a new resurrection body. That new body could go from here to there quickly. It could go through walls. Remember, he went right through the tomb. The door, the stone was not moved to let Jesus out. It was moved to let Jesus' disciples in to see that he wasn't there. So he had a new body. Now, we don't have that body. One day we will. We're going to have a body in heaven like his that we'll be able to go through doors. Don't try it tonight. Open the doors in the back when you leave. We don't have that body yet, okay? But aren't you looking forward to that new body? I mean, do you ever have any aches and pains? Now that I'm 62, boy, I got some aches and pains. When I was in high school and college, I could work from morning till night. No problems at all. Now, I feel it, and so I'm going to looking forward to that new body. But Jesus had a new body, his resurrection body, and he was able to enter this room. Verse 19 tells us the doors were shut, the doors were locked, and yet Jesus was able to still go right through the door, and he came to his disciples. Also remember that Jesus asked the disciples to touch him. So it wasn't that he was just a spirit. Keep that in mind. It was a body. And he also ate with the disciples, remember? So it was a unique body. Now when we get to heaven, I think we will be able to eat. On earth, let's see, how should I put it? Some people live to eat, right? But in heaven, or they eat to live, I should say. But in heaven, we won't have to eat to live. We can eat. I believe we will be able to, but you won't have to. But Jesus came to his disciples. And isn't it remarkable, at least it is to me, that these disciples were actually afraid. Why in the world were they afraid? Jesus said on several occasions, at least a handful of occasions, 3 times in the Gospel of Mark, I'm going to suffer, I'm going to die on the cross, and on the 3rd day, he said, I'm going to rise again. What's confusing about that? How could they not understand that? And yet, they didn't believe the reports. The women came back and said, Jesus had appeared to us. They didn't believe that. The 2 on the road to Emmaus came and they said, we saw the risen Lord. And they didn't believe those reports either. So Jesus comes, and the first thing he did to move them from fear to courage is he came to them. And notice his first word to his disciples. In verse 19, Jesus came and stood in the midst and said to them, if you write your Bibles, I hope you do, circle that word peace. Peace. Peace be with you. I find that amazing because Jesus' disciples, remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, they all fled. They all fled when the Romans came to arrest Jesus. Remember, they came to arrest him. And then all the disciples, what did they do? They ran away. At the cross, only one disciple was there, John. That was the only one. Where were the others? Too afraid, I guess. And then you come to verse 19, and Jesus goes right through the door, the locked door, where they are, and his first word is peace. That's amazing to me. Peace. He doesn't rebuke them, but he speaks a gracious word here, doesn't he? Peace. Now, in the Old Testament, you can study this. You know the word for peace probably already. Shalom, right? Shalom. It's repeated, I think, about at least 200 times, maybe 250 times in the Old Testament. Shalom. Peace. God's highest good to you. Peace. And then in the New Testament, the Greek word is eirene. And do you know anyone by the name of Irene? Irene. That's where you get the name, Irene, from that Greek word. It means peace. Alright, so I don't know. What does Brooks mean? I don't know what my name means. Maybe you know what your name means. Some parents name their kids because their name means something, right? I've heard some people do that. Me, I don't know. What does Brooks mean? I don't know what it means. But Irene means peace. And the word peace, by the way, in the New Testament is found about 100 times. Peace. So over 300 times the word shalom or eirene is found in the Bible. And here, Jesus' first words to his disciples, the first word out of his mouth is peace. And isn't that what you want tonight? Peace. Peace. God's perfect peace. Charles Stanley has a book out on God's perfect peace. Freedom, yes, you can have freedom from guilt, regret, worry, and fear. That's God's perfect peace, you see. Peace. Now let's think about the word shalom. It does not mean, I hope you don't have any trouble. I mean, if you think when you receive Jesus Christ as your Savior, as your Lord and Savior, and you think, well, okay, no more problems in my life, smooth sailing here until I get to heaven. That's not the case. So that's not true. But what shalom means is, it means, I hope the highest good comes your way. That's what it means. I hope you have all the highest good coming your way. Shalom. It's a desire that all that is good would flow into your life. That's what the word shalom means. And eirene means about the same thing, peace. We need peace, don't we? We need peace in our lives. Peace. And peace, by the way, is not the absence of problems. We can still have peace even though we may be going through, not maybe, we are going through tough times, problems. Peace is not the absence of problems. Listen now, it's the addition of power. God's power in our lives. That's what peace is, you see? So it doesn't depend on circumstances. We can have peace even in the midst of some tough times that we face. See? Peace. And peace is really priceless, isn't it? You can't put a money figure on that, can you? I mean, some people wish they had peace, and they give all the money in the world to have that peace. They just don't have any peace. They wish they did. But Jesus, remember when he appeared before Pilate? He was calm, wasn't he? He was calm. What an example to us. Calm in the face of opposition. That's when he stood before Pilate, he was calm. And historians tell us in the last 3,500 years, there's only been, I think I read something like 256 or something years of peace. That comes out to less than 10% of the years. I'm surprised even that high. I mean, it seems like there's always wars all around us, right? Peace. And then in the last 5,500 years, there's been 8,000 peace treaties broken. 8,000. Can you imagine? Peace. The world wants peace too. But we need peace. But peace is only found in Jesus, you see? And Jesus wants to give us his peace. Look at John 14:27. You'll find that twice. So peace. That is what we need. And that's what Jesus offered to his disciples. That's what they needed the most, didn't they? They were afraid. They were confused. They were discouraged. They were depressed. And so Jesus appears to them, and I wonder if they thought, uh-oh, I wonder if he's going to talk to us about how we ran away. He doesn't even bring it up, does he? Jesus says, peace be with you. So the first thing that Jesus did to bring them from fear to courage was he came to them. That brings us to the second thing he did, and he not only came to them, he reassured them. That's found in verse 20. Look at verse 20. When he had said this, or when he had said, peace be with you, he showed them his hands and his side. Now why would he show them his hands and side? Because remember, the nails went through his hands, or his wrist to be exact, and through his feet. And then remember when they took him down from the cross, they put a spear in his side, and blood and water flowed out to show he was truly dead. So Jesus showed them his wounds in his hands and his side, and that's how he reassured them. What was he saying? It's me. There's no doubt about it, it's me. That is what Jesus was telling his disciples. Why? So they would never forget him. That's why. So he not only came to them, but verse 20 says he reassured his disciples. He reassured them and said, it's me. He showed them his wounded hands and side. It was really him, so they would never forget him. And then that brings us to the third thing, which is found in verse 21. He came to them, verse 19. He reassured them, verse 20. And then verse 21, he commissioned them. And these are words you probably will remember as I read them. So Jesus said to them again, peace. You might circle that word again. Second time, peace to you. As the Father hath sent me. Remember these words? So send I you. Powerful words, aren't they? As the Father hath sent me, so send I you. Jesus was commissioning his disciples. He was saying, I want you to go out and I want you to tell the world about me. So he was giving them a commission. We call Matthew 28 the Great Commission, but Jesus gave other commissions too, didn't he? Mark 16:15, go ye into all the world to preach the gospel to every creature. Luke 24:47, Acts 1, we're going to look into that when we look at the ascension, Acts 1:8. Jesus was telling his disciples, you have a job now. Your job is to do what I've done. The mission that God gave his son, Luke 19:10, he came to seek and to save who? The lost. That includes you and me, doesn't it? Jesus came, now think about this now, he came to seek and to save the lost. And now in verse 21, Jesus tells his disciples, these 10 disciples, as the Father has sent me to seek and to save the lost, so send I you. That's what he was saying. See? What a commission he was giving them. In other words, he was saying, you're going to represent me. That's an amazing thing, isn't it? That we can represent Jesus in the world. How's that going for you? How are you doing in that? See, in your words? Think about your words. If someone could follow you, one time I heard someone say, if someone could follow you with a tape recorder the whole week and record your words, see, that's a challenge, isn't it? Or how about your actions? How about they had a video recorder for your actions? So what we say and what we do, we need to represent Jesus. That's how we're a witness, see? With our words and with our actions, we represent Jesus. So this is the challenge. What is the picture of Jesus that the world is getting from us? See? Do they look at us? Do they see our impatience? I don't know about you. I'm impatient, unfortunately. My wife is so patient, I know, and she's rubbing off on me, but I'm not the most patient person in the world. You know, like when my daughter was so little, I said, hey, Chris, your dad is patient, right? I was in the car. She goes, no. Oh, boy, that's Chris Green. She said, no. And, you know, our kids know us, right? But does the world see your impatience? How about your anger? Or some of the other things that would not represent Jesus well? And yet Jesus said, as the Father has sent me, so send I you. So the Father's business that he gave to his Son, remember Luke 2, verse 49, Jesus said, I am about my Father's business. Remember that? Luke 2:49. What was his Father's business? To seek and to save the lost. So we have the privilege, but also the awesome responsibility of representing Jesus in the world and of telling people about Jesus. I'd like to close with an illustration because Dwight L. Moody, you've heard that name before, right? Dwight L. Moody. Dwight L. Moody was, and look, it's amazing. Steve Scolase just sent me a text, and you won't believe what he just sent me. He said, seek to save the lost. Isn't that amazing? He just sent me those words. I just talked about that. That's amazing that he just sent that. But anyway, I want you to think about D.L. Moody. Dwight L. Moody was in the 20th century. He was born in 1832. He died in 1899, which means he was my age, 62. He traveled over 1 million miles. He reached 100 million people. He spoke to 100 million people with the gospel. Isn't that amazing? Dwight L. Moody. 25 million of those 100 million were young people. 750,000 he reached with the gospel, we're told. Dwight L. Moody. Now I want to share with you, because I want to encourage you, because if Jesus said that the Father sent him into the world and he's sending the disciples, he's also sending you. I want you to realize that. He's sending you into the world to tell people about Jesus. Are you doing that? When's the last person you told? So I want to challenge you with the life of Dwight L. Moody. You say, well, I'm not very good at talking. Okay, well, that's okay, because Dwight L. Moody was led to the Lord by his Sunday school teacher, Edward Kimball. I know you remember that. Edward Kimball was shy, he was nervous, and he said, I want to share the gospel with one of my students in my Sunday school class, Dwight L. Moody. I want to go to his shoe store where he worked. So he went to Boston. D.L. Moody worked in Boston in a shoe store. And his teacher was so nervous. He said, well, maybe I shouldn't go in there. I think he'll be embarrassed. Maybe I shouldn't bother him, while he's working. So he was so nervous he walked right by the shoe store. And then he said, well, no, I think I will. So he went back in, and Dwight L. Moody was in the back of the shoe store wrapping shoes. And he said, I don't even remember what I said to him. But he said, I remember I put my hand on his shoulder and I witnessed to him, and he got saved. So maybe you're here tonight, you say, I've never shared Christ with anyone. Well, you can do it. If this Sunday school teacher can do it, he was so nervous, and he still couldn't even remember what he said, but he put his hand on his shoulder, and people know that you care. See? And that's the most important thing, that you can tell someone about Jesus, how they could be saved. And that's what Edward Kimball did. Dwight L. Moody then had something that happened that influenced him to win souls for Christ. He had a Sunday school teacher that he knew that asked him if he would go with him to visit the girls in his Sunday school class. This Sunday school teacher was dying, and he had to move, and he said, I hate to say it, but he said, I've never really led any of the girls in my class to Christ. I'd like to visit them. Would you like to go with me? So Dwight L. Moody had never led a soul to Christ yet, but he went with this teacher. And this Sunday school teacher went to each of the homes of the girls in his class. And there were a lot of tears shed when they told him he was dying, but he wanted to share Christ with them. They all got saved, every single one of them. That was what influenced Dwight L. Moody to lead souls to Christ. And I read about how D.L. Moody was witnessing to a hoodlum, as he called it, in Chicago, a young man. And the young man shouted, mind your own business, he said. And D.L. Moody said, that is my business. My business is leading souls to Christ. Well, believe it or not, 3 months later, that young man, that hoodlum, he couldn't get those words out of his head for 3 months. And he knocked on the door at the home of D.L. Moody and said, I couldn't get those words out of my mind. Would you tell me how to be saved? He got saved, and he became one of the leaders in the Moody Church in Chicago. And then another example, which I think will encourage your heart. Peter Billhorn. Don't know if you know that name. He was a gospel musician. Ira Sankey, you've heard that name. He was sick. And so D.L. Moody asked Peter Billhorn if he would lead the song service at the evangelistic service that he was having in Chicago. It was 1892, so this was about 7 years before he died. And Peter Billhorn was staying in a motel with D.L. Moody. It was a stormy night, and D.L. Moody told Peter Billhorn, I have a rule that I live by in my life. I have to talk to at least one person every day about the Lord. One. At least one. Well, Peter Billhorn said, I know, I was with him the whole day. He had not talked to anybody yet. And he had a service that night. It was pouring down rain. The storm was terrible, really hard rain. And so Peter Billhorn said, you haven't talked to anybody yet, have you? He said, no, but I will be. And so what happened is that they went down to the carriage. And now if you can picture this, Peter Billhorn and D.L. Moody, they're going to go to the Opera House in Chicago. And it's raining really hard. And Peter Billhorn was going to let D.L. Moody get in the carriage first. And D.L. Moody said, no, you go first. And so Peter Billhorn got in. He said, I came to realize by knowing D.L. Moody, you don't question. When he wants something done, you do it. So he got in first. D.L. Moody got in after him. And D.L. Moody kept opening the door of the carriage and looking out. And it was pouring down rain. He was getting soaked. And Peter Billhorn said, what in the world is he doing? And so he closed the door, and then they'd go farther in the carriage. He'd open the door and look outside the door of the carriage. Finally, he said, stop the carriage, he said. And he got out, there was a man walking with an umbrella, really windy and raining hard. He said, "Would you like a ride? We're going to the Opera House." So he got in. And so D.L. Moody asked him, he said, "Are you a Christian?" He said, "No, I'm not, but I'm going to the Opera House to hear D.L. Moody to find out how to become a Christian."
Wow.
So what happened is that D.L. Moody led him to the Lord in that carriage. So he didn't know who it was. So when they finally got to the Opera House, D.L. Moody said to Peter Billhorn, "Make sure he gets a seat down front, okay?" So he sits down front, and at the end, close of that service, D.L. Moody says, "I want all the Christians who are here tonight to stand." That man stood up. He was saved. Isn't that neat? The final illustration I want to share with you, which is also a powerful illustration, is that D.L. Moody was on a streetcar in Chicago. Have you ever been on a streetcar like San Francisco? Have you done that? It's pretty neat. Well, anyway, D.L. Moody's on a streetcar. He's returning home after a meeting, and it's crowded. A crowded streetcar, and he's holding the strap. Have you ever done that? He's holding the strap, and one of the people that were riding in the streetcar said, "Who's that big guy?" And he weighed like 300 pounds, I remember hearing. He said, "Who's that big guy over there?" They said, "That's the evangelist D.L. Moody." So this man, he was thought, well, I'm going to ridicule him. And so he said, "Hey, Sky Pilot," he said, "how far is it from Chicago to heaven?" And D.L. Moody, without missing a beat, quick as lightning, he answered, "1 step. Will you take it?" he said. So they stopped this streetcar, and the man jumped off the back, and Moody went over and he cupped his hands like this. He said, "1 step," he said. "Will you take it?" he said, and he ran off into the night. Okay. Well, what happened is that the following night, Moody had a service. And he said, "I want to tell you what happened to me on the streetcar last night." He said, "There was a young man there who yelled at me, and he asked me how far it was from Chicago to heaven. I said, 'It's 1 step.' I said, 'Will you take it?' 1 step. So D.L. Moody said, "Who here tonight will take that 1 step from Chicago to heaven and be saved?" Well, there was some commotion, and someone came from the back of the church to the platform. It was that man on that streetcar. And he received Christ. So don't think you can't do it, and keep in mind that as the Father sent Jesus into the world to represent him, you all and me are sent to the world to represent him. Okay? Don't ever forget that. Let's stand and we'll be dismissed in prayer. Let's bow our heads and our hearts together in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, what a special evening this has been. We thank you that just as God the Son was sent into this world by God the Father to seek and to save the lost, what an awesome responsibility we have. It's also a privilege to seek and to save the lost too. Some of us here tonight, maybe we're a little bit afraid to do that, but with your power, with your wisdom, we can. So give us boldness like the disciples had after they met Jesus. They went from fear to courage. So make us bold witnesses for you in this world. We ask these things in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Amen.